If Sir Arthur Conan Doyle combined The Lost World with Bram Stoker's Dracula and gave it a garnish of Gulliver's Travels, you'd get this prehistoric island. If you remember my Eustreptospondylus video, I talked about the ancient Tethys Ocean, and I mentioned how it turned much of Europe into a chain of islands. What I didn't mention is that this sea existed throughout the Mesozoic era and into the early Cenozoic. Basically, that means that European dinosaurs had nearly 100 million years to adapt to island living, and that's how we got some of the strangest dinosaurs the continent had ever seen. Hațeg Island was an island in the Tethys that stood where Romania and Hungary would later be formed. Sat just 200 miles from the mainland, it's estimated that this island was no bigger than modern-day Hispaniola, with a seasonally subtropical climate. The closest modern analog that I could find is that Hațeg was kind of like if Louisiana or Mississippi was an island, just with much less moonshine and no Mardi Gras. That said, if you look at the fauna of Hațeg Island, you'll legitimately believe someone spiked your drink with Southern Comfort. The largest herbivores on this island were titanosaurian sauropods, and for those of you who don't know, titanosaurs were the largest land animals to ever live, with the heaviest members being anywhere from 70 to 80 tons in weight. And on this island, these behemoths weighed an astonishing, overpowering 1 ton. Hațeg Island was home to 4 different species of titanosaurians, those titans in question being Uriash, Petrus titan, Paluda titan, and Magyarosaurus. Although the term titan doesn't really describe them, as most of these animals were no heavier than a modern-day Indian rhino at anywhere from 1 to 2 tons. Even the largest of these sauropods, Uriash, weighed as much as a Tyrannosaurus rex at just 8 tons. In fact, when you look at other dinosaurs that live on Hațeg, you'll notice that a lot of them are pint-sized compared to their relatives. For example, an average Edmontosaurus rivals a semi-truck trailer in size, but an average Telmatosaurus was no bigger than a shire horse. Other Hațeg natives, such as Zalmoxes, Transylvaniasaurus, and Struthiosaurus, were also rather small for their kind. But why? Well, basically, these animals had to be small. You see, islands have a limited amount of space and natural resources, which also means that they can only support a certain number of animals. In response to these pressures, animals have evolved to become smaller and thus require less resources to survive. This island rule applied to the dinosaurs of Hațeg Island and has also been seen in modern animals such as Bornean elephants and the Channel Island fox. So insular dwarfism gave us some miniature dinosaurs, but there were some creatures here who stayed more or less the same size. Travel back in time and traverse Hațeg Island, and you'll have to be on the lookout for an animal that looks like a cross between an owl, a kiwi bird, and a raptor. Well, meet the island's local pest controller, Braddock-neem draculae. It was the devil's buzzard, and quite the enigmatic species of theropod, with paleontologists spending well over 36 years trying to figure out just what it was. In fact, some researchers initially thought it was a large species of owl. It wasn't until 2011 that paleontologists proposed that Braddock-neem was an alvarosaurid, something of a European relative to animals like the Mongolian Mononychus. That may not sound like much, but alvarosaurids are already dinosaurian casserole. They have the eyes and ears of an owl, the claws of a silky anteater, and a head that wouldn't look out of place on a woodpecker. All of these features combined help these dinosaurs search for their favorite foods, insects and their larvae. So on a forested island littered with places for insects to hide, Braddock-neem essentially lived in a prehistoric golden corral. But this island was home to more than just dinosaurs. If you look at the rivers, you'd likely see a variety of turtles, and, if you're lucky, you may find the small Madsoid snake, Nidophis. If you're a little less fortunate, you could accidentally run into Allodaphasuchus, a prehistoric crocodilian similar to the modern-day mugger crocodile. Moving away from the waterways, the undergrowth of Hațeg Island was home to various species of lizards and small mammals. But another animal that can be found amongst the ferns is Gargantuavus, a primitive bird, and perhaps the first example of flightlessness in avians. It's kind of like a Cretaceous-era dodo, and just like the dodo, Gargantuavis likely evolved to become flightless mainly due to a lack of predators on Hațeg Island. But this isn't even remotely the weirdest animal on Hațeg Island. This is Balar Bondoc. It's a Paravian theropod named after a Romanian dragon, and ever since it was discovered, it has been an absolute pain for paleontologists. Balar honestly needs a whole separate video to explain their madness, but here are some highlights. They have two-fingered hands like a tyrannosaur. They have a robust frame but are believed to climb trees. The metatarsals in their ankles are fused like a bird. They have sickle claws like Velociraptor, but instead of one pair, they have two hooks of death. And that's just the stuff we do know, and they've been confusing dino nerds for years. In fact, some paleontologists thought that they were the apex predators of Hațeg Island, until they remembered that these existed. Being the Mesozoic, this island was home to a few species of pterosaur. Urasdarko and Albadraco were a pair of predatory Asdarchid pterosaurs that were tall enough to look a man in the eye. But these two had nothing compared to the real apex predator of This thing is a bobble-headed me to my mental health. Hatzegopteryx is arguably the largest flying animal to ever live, standing at a height of 15 feet tall, weighing up to 250 pounds, and possessing a wingspan just under 40 feet across. They're also the Jason Voorhees of pterosaurs, and scarring on the jawbone suggests that they killed prey by stabbing and bludgeoning them with their massive beaks. What's more, pterosaur expert Mark Whitten suggests that these animals could swallow anything as large as a human, which is horrifying for an animal that big, and just to remind you, that thing can freaking fly! Hatzegopteryx was no doubt the apex predator and the tyrannical king of Hațeg Island. But really, this is just another example of how islands can twist a species in a unique direction. A lot of Asdarchids are believed to have been scavengers that mostly fed on small animals like mammals, lizards, and small dinosaurs. But with Hațeg Island seemingly having no dominant theropod predators, Hatzegopteryx took up the mantle of apex predator, and over time, became an honest-to-God threat to my mental health. But this just makes Hațeg Island one of the most confusing, terrifying, and beautiful places that have unfortunately been lost to prehistory. And on that note, that's the end of the line for this video. Don't forget to leave a like and a comment on this video to help educate the world of the weirdos of Hațeg Island. I'm sorry I've been gone for a minute, summer calculus courses have started, and I'm already not having an easy time of it. But don't fret, I will survive. Borderline, depending on how this summer goes. Well, that's it for now. See you around.